In a remote mountain village in Morocco, there lived a woman named Lalla Zainab. Known far and wide for her generosity and wisdom, people from all over sought her blessings and guidance. Her hospitality was legendary, no visitor left her home without a meal or a kind word. One evening, just as the sky began to dim, a mysterious stranger arrived in the village. He wore a long, flowing robe, his head wrapped in a hood that obscured most of his face, adding an air of mystique. With a voice as smooth as honey, he introduced himself as a traveling holy man, seeking a night's shelter. Lalla Zainab, ever the gracious host, invited him in without hesitation. The next morning, the stranger wandered the village, quietly asking about local legends, especially stories of hidden treasures. The villagers, taken in by his guise of holiness, eagerly shared their stories. They didn't suspect that the man was not who he seemed, he was not in search of wisdom but wealth. Days passed, and the stranger continued his inquiries, blending in yet always lurking in the shadows, trying to gather information without raising suspicion. But in a village where everyone knows everyone, his questions eventually raised eyebrows. The villagers began to whisper, wondering why a supposed holy man would be so curious about lost treasures. One evening, while the villagers were gathered around the communal fire, an old shepherd spoke up, his voice barely louder than a murmur. He had seen the stranger digging near the old oak tree, a place rumored to conceal riches beneath its roots. The shepherd described the scene, the stranger's face contorted in greedy anticipation, frantically clawing at the dirt, as though the treasure he sought would slip away. Lalla Zainab listened quietly, her face unreadable. She had a strong intuition, and she felt a mixture of anger and sadness for the man who had deceived her kindness. That night, as the villagers slept, she approached the stranger, now feverishly digging in the moonlight. She stood silently for a moment, letting the weight of her gaze bear down on him until he looked up, startled and ashamed. Her voice was calm yet piercing. "You came to my door seeking shelter, claiming to be a man of God," she said. "Yet here you are, driven by greed, thinking you could deceive us. But remember this, you may fool people for a time, but the truth has a way of unearthing itself, much like the treasure you seek." The man could find no words, his face paled as he realized the depth of his shame. The villagers gathered around them, their expressions a mixture of disappointment and betrayal. Without a word, they watched as he left the village, his head hung low. As he disappeared into the shadows, the villagers turned back to Lalla Zainab, a silent promise on their lips to uphold the values of integrity and respect she embodied.